Currently, we just have a basic Hello World example from the Bootstrap starter template. We're now going to change this by adding the top navigation. If we go over to the finished version here, this is going to be the top navigation bar, which is here. Over on the left-hand side, we'll have a home link with a site title, and then on the right, we'll have our links. If we shrink the browser down, this will be fully responsive, meaning this will also drop down to a button, which we can click on to get our menu links on smaller devices. So let's start over in the index.html. The first thing I'm going to do, so we don't have any problems in the Bootstrap CSS, I'm going to remove these two attributes of integrity and also the last one of cross origin. Then bring this back up on the same line. Also the same for the JavaScript at the bottom. So the one where we linked our minified version, we can remove the cross origin and the integrity and then give this a save. The next step is to remove our hello world. This was just the sample code and we no longer need this. Instead, we're going to get started with a header. So open up the header and then nested inside we have the nav element. The nav element is going to contain two things. First of all, on the left-hand side, we're going to have the site title, which we've seen before, and then the menu links over on the right. These menu links will collapse into the drop-down button on smaller devices. So let's get started by adding these in now. Let's begin with our link, which is going to be for the site title of Tranquil Spa. This is going to have some Bootstrap classes. If we save this and then check this out, we can see it's just pretty standard text at the moment. Let's start in the nav element by adding some Bootstrap classes. The first one is the simple navbar. If we give this a save and then reload, we can see this is now moved in from the top edge. We can see what styles have been applied by going into the developer tools with right click and inspect. If we then click on the selector and then hover over our navbar, make sure this nav line is highlighted. And then on the right, we can see what styles have been applied by Bootstrap from this navbar class. We can see that it uses the CSS flexbox as the display type. We're also using some padding, which moved in from the top corner, which we've seen before. We can add additional classes to this too. So just after the navbar, I'm going to add navbar, expand -md. Give this a save and these styles will apply over the medium-sized devices. So if we reload this, we can see in the media query, these styles will So just a normal HTML button. So inside here, we can add some Bootstrap classes. The first one is going to be navbar toggler. And then the type attribute of button. We're not going to add any text inside of here because soon we'll be adding a icon, and this icon is the 3 lines which you see on the finished version up in the corner. So the next 2 attributes which we add to the button will be related to the small screen and the drop-down content which it controls. First of all, let's add the data toggle to be equal to collapse. And then we can also add the data target. And we're going to set this to be equal to a ID. So let's add the hash in and call this the navbar nav. So here we're setting the data toggle and we're declaring we want the content to collapse when this button has been clicked on. But which content do we want to collapse? Well, if we look at the finished version, this is going to collapse and expand this navigation menu. We haven't created this yet, but once we do, we'll give this a ID of navbar nav. This data target can be any CSS selector we want. So we'll just use it like regular JavaScript. If we want to target a class, we can use the dot, or we use the hash for an ID. Just before we create the div we want to control by the button, I'm going to add a span which is going to add in the icons that we've just seen before. This span is going to have the class to add these icons in of navbar toggler icon. Let's check this out over in the browser. Then reload down to the smaller screen. And we now have the button with the 3 icons from our span. If we expand the browser, we should also see that this button disappears because we've added this expand on medium devices. Now let's create our div for the links. So this is going to be the container for our home and our blog navigation link. And it's going to be the container which this button toggles open and close. So let's get to work. Just below our button, let's add our div, which is our container. The first class is going to be equal to collapse. This is used to hide the content when we need to. Next up, we have navbar collapse. The second Bootstrap class will group all the contents together, and it'll also be used in conjunction with the navbar expand MD, so it knows to hide this container underneath this breakpoint. And the third one is for the CSS flexbox. So this is justify content end, and this will push our links over to the right hand side of the navigation. Inside of this div, we can go ahead and create our links, which is going to be an unordered list. This unordered list also takes in some classes to add the styling and layout, and the first one is going to be navbar nav. We then add our list items. The list items classes are going to be nav item. And then nested inside, we have a link by using the A element with the text of home. This link is going to have a class of navLink. And then we can set the href to point to our index.html. Good, let's copy this and add it in one more time for our blog. Just after this first list item, paste this in. This is going to be for the blog. And we can also change the href to be our blog.html. Of course, we've not created this, but we'll get to this in a later video. So give that file a save and then over to the browser. Let's reload and expand this. We see on the larger screens, we have our home and blog links. And then thanks to the button, this hides the content on these smaller devices. But if we click on this button in the top corner, we don't see the links dropping down. This is because if we go to our button, we've set the data target of navbar nav, but we've not added this to our container. So inside this div, let's add the ID of navbar nav. Give this a save, reload the browser, and now we get a working drop-down menu. Expand this. And this now goes back into the full screen view. Good, so this is it now for the menu, and we'll continue with the header Next, when we add the featured background image,